Ooh la la! I know it's a little late for Valentine's Day, but I've always maintained that summer is the real season for love. And in the 1990s, dating on the West Coast lived in the gap between surf wax and dial-up tone, suspended somewhere between the salt in the air and the hiss of a modem trying to connect. It was an era when romance moved at the speed of a busy signal, when anticipation was measured in minutes staring at a silent phone, and when a good outfit could be ruined by fog in San Francisco or redeemed by sunshine in San Diego. Being reachable was not an expectation so much as a personal habit, a choice rather than a constant condition. People did not carry the internet in their pockets. They carried quarters for payphones, a folded slip of paper with a number written on it, sometimes smudged or half torn, and, if they were feeling bold, hope. The pace was slower, the clues were mostly analog, and the stakes felt oddly higher because there wasn't a whole new menu of strangers waiting behind a glowing screen. If a date went well, the only algorithm involved was whether someone's roommate would pick up the phone and decide to be helpful or hostile, cheerful or suspicious, cooperative or amused by the power they suddenly held. Most West Coast romances began the way most West Coast things began in the 1990s, by showing up somewhere and lingering just long enough to be noticed. People met at work, at school, at the coffee shop where everyone pretended to read while actually scanning the room, or at the bar where the jukebox seemed to control the entire emotional weather. There was an art to appearing casually available, to leaning against a counter or standing a little longer in line than strictly necessary. Los Angeles offered its own special category of encounters, meeting someone at a party where half the guests were in the industry, and the other half were friends of friends who insisted they were just here for the music, even as they subtly networked their way through the room. In the Bay Area, meetings often happened in bookstores, record stores, and house parties where somebody had opinions about bands and expected others to have them too, and where a shared taste could feel like a minor miracle. Up north, Seattle's grunge years supplied a steady stream of dim venues, thrift store, fashion, and conversations shouted over guitars, while Portland specialized in the kind of hangout where the flirting was low volume, the irony carefully layered, and the sarcasm brewed to a fine balance. Face-to-face introductions were the main event, not a bonus or a final step. Friends were the original matchmakers, which meant people frequently dated within overlapping social circles, sometimes knowingly and sometimes by accident. On the West Coast, that could look like meeting a friend's roommate's coworker at a backyard barbecue in Oakland, or locking eyes with a stranger at a beach bonfire in Santa Cruz, or being introduced at a co-ed rec league in San Diego, where everyone swore they were there for fun, but still arrived early and stayed late. Workplaces were common too. Not always wise, often complicated, but undeniably common. A meet cute might be as simple as two people assigned to the same shift, or as chaotic as someone finally asking out the attractive person who kept showing up at the same late-night diner after concerts. There was more public mingling and also more casual permission to talk to strangers without the immediate assumption that one of them was running a scam, selling something, or documenting the interaction for later analysis. For the more adventurous, or the more tired of seeing the same faces at the same bars, there were personal ads. Newspapers and local weeklies ran classifieds, where people wrote tiny autobiographies in a paragraph and hoped a stranger would decode them correctly. The format was brutally compact and oddly revealing. A handful of adjectives, a hint of lifestyle, a wry joke if someone was brave, and an optimistic request for someone fun, who also, ideally, did not have a complicated relationship with flakiness. Some people treated those pages as entertainment, reading them the way they read comics or gossip columns, marveling at the confidence or eccentricity on display. But plenty of real couples started there. It was the original low-resolution profile. No photos, no scrolling, no swiping, just the faith that loves hiking and sushi meant roughly what it said, and that the person behind the words was at least interesting enough to warrant a letter or a phone call. There were also dating services and phone lines, plus the slightly sci-fi novelty of video dating, where people recorded introductions and watched other people's tapes with the same mixture of curiosity and secondhand embarrassment usually reserved for talent shows. Seeing someone speak directly to a camera could feel intimate or alarming, sometimes both at once. In certain cities, missed connections style notices popped up in alternative papers, turning an ordinary brush with a stranger into a public wish. The person on the bus, the one in line at the burrito place, the one at the show who smiled and disappeared before anyone could do anything useful about it. West Coast life produced endless almost stories. Near conversations, shared glances, moments that hovered just shy of something. And the 1990s provided a few quirky mechanisms for converting almost into maybe. And then, creeping in like a new kind of weather, early online dating began. It did not look like today, slick and image-heavy and relentlessly optimized. It looked like AOL chat rooms, clunky profile directories, niche forums, and that particular kind of late-night courage that emerges after too much soda and not enough sleep. People asked A/S/L or age, sex, location without irony and answered it without much thought. They typed flirtations at the speed of their modem and tried to decide if they were talking to a real person, a bored teenager, or someone's idea of a prank. In Silicon Valley and other tech-heavy pockets of the West Coast, meeting online arrived earlier and felt slightly less taboo, but it still carried a whiff of last resort in mainstream culture. Even so, it happened, and for some people, it worked surprisingly well, precisely because a screen made shy people bolder. It was easier to be witty when one could pause, backspace, and refine a sentence before sending it into the void, and easier to open up when the immediate pressure of being seen was temporarily removed. Once two people decided they might like to be two people in the same physical space, logistics took over, and the logistics were charmingly complicated. Arranging a date usually meant a phone call to a landline, made at a carefully chosen hour. Calling someone meant taking the risk of speaking to whoever else lived there. A parent, a roommate, a sibling with a suspicious tone, or a household gatekeeper who demanded to know exactly who was calling and why. Voices cracked, confidence vanished, names were repeated too loudly, then repeated again because the connection was fuzzy or because the caller panicked. If the person was not home, a message might be left on an answering machine, where the caller had to decide between casual and sincere, while knowing their own voice might later be replayed for an audience of friends. A carefully crafted message could be charming and replayed fondly. An awkward one could become legend, retold years later with affectionate horror. Because immediate communication was not guaranteed, plans were often made in advance and held with an almost ceremonial seriousness. People picked a time and a place and then, astonishingly, showed up. There was no constant stream of updates, no running commentary from the car, no quick on my way text that arrived when someone was still deciding what shoes to wear. If someone was late, the other person waited and tried to look relaxed while privately rehearsing alternate explanations. Traffic on the 405, a missed exit, a parking disaster, an unforeseen roommate crisis. If the wait stretched too long, someone might hunt down a payphone, feed it coins, and call the number they had memorized or scribbled on a receipt. Carrying cash mattered. So did remembering phone numbers. The 1990s quietly rewarded people who could keep a small archive in their head and tolerate a little uncertainty without unraveling. Transportation shaped romance in a way that now feels almost quaint. The West Coast is famously spread out, and dating radius was often limited by freeways, gas money, and the endurance required to cross a metropolitan area at the wrong hour. A Los Angeles relationship could be tested by geography alone, measured in miles, traffic reports, and patience. In the Bay Area, a bridge could feel like a commitment, and a missed train could feel like fate intervening. In smaller towns and suburbs, a car was social power. Without one, a person's love life could depend on rides from friends and the goodwill of whoever was doing the driving. Some couples went parking, finding a secluded lookout, listening to music, and making out with the earnest intensity of a decade that still believed the right song could rewrite a person's entire future. What were the dates themselves like? They were usually activities, not vibes, shaped by places rather than playlists. A movie date might involve actual conversation beforehand because there was no texting to fill the day with small talk. Dinner could be casual, tacos, burgers, a neighborhood diner, especially for younger adults and students. But the goal was to go somewhere and do something together, to share time rather than merely check in. Bowling alleys, mini golf, arcades, concerts, coffee houses, beach walks, hikes, bookstores, and record stores all worked as first date terrain because they offered built-in topics and easy exits. A date at a video store, especially the fluorescent wonderland of a place like Blockbuster, was practically a ritual, wandering the aisles, making gentle fun of each other's tastes, negotiating between serious film person and I just want something fun, then carrying home a plastic case that represented the evening's fate. Music was its own love language. Mixtapes were not only common, they were meaningful, dense with intention. Making one took time, which meant gifting one felt like gifting attention and effort. A mixtape could be flirtation, confession, or a carefully disguised apology. Its track order, analyzed for hidden meaning. On the West Coast, where scenes mattered, grunge in the Northwest, hip-hop and skate culture in California, rave pockets and indie pockets everywhere. Music taste was social currency, and a date could turn on whether someone mocked the wrong band or genuinely listened. People also went to shows more casually. The lower barrier to entry created an ecosystem where a concert could be a normal weeknight plan instead of a major financial undertaking, and where shared sweat in a crowded venue could feel like intimacy. There were also group dates and rolling deep, especially among younger people or anyone wanting the safety and comfort of numbers. A first hang might be with us, and then, if things warmed up, it became with me. This blurred line between social life and dating was one of the era's defining features. In many cases, people got to observe each other in public before committing to a formal date, which meant chemistry could build organically rather than on demand. At the same time, breakups could be socially messy because everyone shared the same hangouts. There was no magical option to disappear into a new algorithmic pool. If two people split, there was a decent chance they would still see each other at the same coffee shop, the same friend's party, or the same bar where the bartender knew everyone's business. For queer communities on the West Coast, the 1990s were both vibrant and heavy. Cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Seattle had established gay bars and social spaces that served as crucial hubs for meeting people, flirting, and forming relationships. At the same time, the shadow of the AIDS crisis shaped behavior, fear, and intimacy, especially among gay men, infusing dating with a seriousness that could coexist uneasily with joy. Dating could be both more cautious and more urgent, a mix that influenced everything from where people met to how they talked about safety and commitment. In that sense, the decade's romance was not uniformly carefree. Its lightness was often earned rather than assumed. As for what you did when you got home with your new girlfriend or boyfriend, well, that was the same in the 90s as it has been for the past 300,000 years, and probably still is today. Anyway, the odds of dates turning into long-term relationships were shaped by that smaller pool and by the higher friction of meeting someone new. When choices are limited and effort is required, people often give a connection more room to develop, sometimes by default. Many couples in the 1990s dated one person at a time, not because everyone was morally perfect, but because juggling multiple possibilities demanded more coordination than most people could manage without a spreadsheet and a pager. A relationship could drift into seriousness by sheer momentum, regular calls, regular meetups, the gradual merging of friend groups, the casual habit of dropping by someone's place. That did not guarantee happy endings. People still broke up for the usual reasons, sometimes with spectacular drama, but the culture encouraged a longer runway. There was more waiting, more wondering, more time for best friend first, romance second to emerge, even if plenty of people also sprinted into passion with the enthusiasm of someone who had just discovered a new late-night diner. Comparing 1990s dating to the modern scene is like comparing a road trip with a paper map to one guided by GPS. The paper map forces attention, awareness, and a certain humility. It also makes wrong turns more likely and mistakes harder to undo. Modern dating offers reach and efficiency. People can meet outside their social circles, outside their cities, outside their usual types. That has been liberating for many, especially for those in smaller communities or those whose dating pool once felt painfully narrow. Today, it is easier to find people who are explicitly looking for the same thing, whether that is marriage, casual dating, queer community, polyamory, or something in between. It is also easier to screen for deal breakers up front, to communicate quickly, and to confirm someone exists beyond a single conversation. but the trade-off is the sense of endlessness. The modern experience can feel like a human shopping mall, where everyone is both customer and product, endlessly browsed and briefly considered. When the supply of potential matches looks infinite, it becomes tempting to treat each interaction as disposable. Some people describe the shift as moving from connection first to catalog first, where appearance and a handful of stats become the primary filters before chemistry ever has a chance. The 1990s were hardly free of superficiality. People have always cared about looks, but the medium forced more discovery in person. Body language mattered, voice mattered, awkwardness mattered, and sometimes awkwardness softened into charm because it wasn't instantly judged against 100 other options waiting in the phone. Modern tools also create a kind of constant proximity. Texting, location sharing, social media, and the subtle expectation of rapid replies can compress the early stages of dating until the getting to know you phase feels like a speed run rather than a slow unfolding. In the 1990s, people could miss each other without it being interpreted as disrespect. They could go to work, be unreachable, and return to the relationship later in the evening like it was a place they visited, not a chat thread that never closes. There was less digital surveillance and fewer opportunities to spiral into comparing one's relationship to someone else's curated highlight reel. Privacy was not a strategy, it was the default condition. At the same time, it would be dishonest to claim the 1990s were universally kinder or safer. People still faced harassment, coercion, and the risks that come with meeting strangers. Many cultural norms were less explicit about consent and boundaries than modern conversations encourage. The freedom to be more forward sometimes meant a greater tolerance for behavior that today would be challenged more directly. Modern dating culture, for all its frustrations, is also more fluent in discussing consent, identity, and expectations. Conversations that can make intimacy healthier, even when they make early flirting feel more complicated and self-conscious. So, was it better or worse? The 1990s offered depth through limitation, fewer options, more repetition, more shared context, and more incentive to work through ordinary friction because starting over took effort. Modern dating offers breadth through access. More options, more customization, and more chances to find someone truly aligned, along with more temptation to keep searching, more burnout, and more performance pressure. One world asks people to be brave in public, the other asks people to be interesting on command. Both can make someone lonely, both can make someone fall in love, sometimes unexpectedly and sometimes despite themselves. In the end, West Coast dating in the 1990s was a practice in presence. People flirted across rooms instead of through screens. They waited for calls and learned the emotional geometry of the answering machine. They made plans that required commitment because rearranging them was inconvenient and often impossible. They met under recognizable landmarks, drove across sprawling cities, and sometimes arrived late with a story instead of an apology emoji. Romance happened in malls, diners, coffee shops, beaches, bookstores, and the endless in-between spaces where people used to kill time together. And if someone wanted to ghost, it took real effort, usually involving courage, avoidance, and the willingness to never go to that one bar again. The decade did not create better lovers, but it did create a different texture of longing, slower, less documented, and more reliant on the strange magic of showing up. If modern dating is a constant stream, 1990s dating was a series of appointments, penciled in and honored as best people could. And while appointments can be missed, they also carry a certain dignity. You could not swipe your way into love. You had to walk into it hoping that the person you came to meet would be there, standing under the glow of a streetlight, or the neon of a marquee, or the gentle hum of a payphone, proving by their presence alone that they meant it enough to show up.
Come along, let's sing, where the joy will bring. Tune into the beat, feel the magic, it's true. Channel 199X, we're here just for you, for you.